Sam, we've seen movies about the First World War. What compelled you to go back and revisit it?
The first thing that compelled me to go back to the First World War was the fact that my grandfather told me stories of it, and I never forgot them and wanted to somehow go back to the place that he told me about when I was a child. Also, you say you've seen more movies about the First World War. There aren't many, and there aren't many good ones.
Paths of Glory?
Paths of Glory was made in 1957. I hate to tell you this. I know you're a young man, but nevertheless, I don't think many contemporary audiences have seen Paths of Glory. You know, I think that's the reality. And there are many things that we're capable of now that we weren't even capable of then. I mean, for example, a one-shot movie would have been impossible even 10 years ago because of projection would have been on film, and you would have had reel changes, so the shot would have been broken every time the reel was changed. But also, I think that it's the beginning of modern warfare. 1914 to 1918. It's a war that starts with horses and infantry and ends with tanks and machine guns. You know, so it's the beginning of industrial warfare. It's the beginning of weapons of mass destruction. There have rarely been moments where the world has changed more than it changed after that war.
In your own time, gentlemen.
Must be something big if the General's here.
You have a brother in the 2nd Battalion.
Yes, sir.
They're walking into a trap. Your orders are to deliver a message calling off tomorrow morning's attack. If you fail, it will be a massacre.
We've got orders to cross here.
That is the German front line.
Hold fast! If we're not clever about this, no one will get to your brother.
I will.
If you don't get there in time, we will lose 1,600 men. Your brother among them. Good luck.
Was your goal to make a movie about these two characters or about the war itself?
The more personal you can make any story, the better. If you were to take on the scale of the First World War, how would you even start? A 4-year war, hundreds of thousands of people died. I think if you try to cram information into a movie, you're going to fail. For me, the way that you engage with it is you force engagement with details, a person, a place, a single time, a moment, you know, even a day, which is how the movie starts. So I wanted to tell a story about these two men, and through that tiny keyhole of their story, see the vast panorama of destruction that was the Great War.
You mentioned the one-shot conceit. Why did you go for that one? Is it for dramatic reasons, or you wanted just to experiment?
It wasn't an experiment, you know, just for the sake of itself. I wanted to force engagement with the central characters. I wanted you to feel attached to him almost physically. The challenge then was that you didn't want to always be in the same position relative to him. Sometimes you want to see him from a distance, sometimes you want to be up close and intimate. And so the choice was an emotional choice, though. It was about how you engage with story and how you engage with character, rather than, wow, look at what we can do with this camera.
We've seen many movies, war movies, that didn't really apply this conceit. And they are brilliant movies. Saving Private Ryan, we mentioned Paths of Glory, and many others. Do you think they were not as emotionally compelling?
Oh, no, not at all. I think they're incredibly compelling. No, I think this is just a very different way to approach a war, is to treat it through the micro, you see the macro. It's not just the one-shot conceit. The real conceit is that it's 2 hours of real time. So it's a ticking clock in the middle of this. It's not a film about a war. It's a film about two men and their friendship and what makes them sacrifice potentially their lives for something bigger than themselves. But I never, I mean, you know, Saving Private Ryan, the first half an hour could not be less like this movie in terms of the way in which Spielberg made it. It's heavily edited, and it's kinetic, and it's just as immersive, more so. It's one of the greatest sequences of any film I've ever seen.
You used this method in Bond.
Yes.
The Inspector, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Was the reason for using it the same one as here?
It was a little bit, actually. I wanted to just drop the audience right into the middle of Mexico City during a Day of the Dead celebration. And I didn't want us to know much more than that. Well, where's Bond? Which one is he? You know, where are we? Who's he chasing? Who's he looking for? And that gave me a bit of courage here to do a similar thing with this movie, which is to operate with no exposition, no explanation as to who these people are, no knowledge about where we were except for a date. And then you have to lean in and work out what's going on for yourself, and then gradually it becomes clear.
The reason I'm talking about this because you are a theater director originally, and then you came here, you entered cinema with a bang. American Beauty, you just mentioned, and you won all the awards, and you excelled over the real cinema directors. What theater has given you to excel in a world that is not yours?
Theatre teaches you certain things. It teaches you to tell a story to a group of people in the dark for 2 hours, 3 hours, to learn how to pace a story without recourse to editing, which is something that came into very handy on this movie. And it teaches you how to work with actors, and it teaches you how to work on a script. But it doesn't teach you how to place a camera or what edits together or how to work with a production designer on location or any of the other things that come with movies. You have to learn that. The difficult thing for me was to persuade myself after years of working in the theatre that I was a film director. Just because somebody else chose to award American Beauty didn't mean that I felt I'd arrived. You know, for me, I feel I've been learning with every movie, and every movie has been a different challenge. And going into the Bond franchise, for example, I felt like a novice again. You know, I had to learn how to shoot action, and I feel looking back, I made some mistakes, and I tried to correct them in the second movie and all those things. And here again, I'm pushing into an area that I didn't know was going to work. But I've always been somebody who's sought to find a style that suits the material, rather than impose a pre-existing style on all the material in the same way.
Cinema, when it started, they wanted to distance themselves from theater by doing all these cuttings. And you went back to the pre-cinema with this method. Is that something because of your theater thinking and your theater vision?
Certainly there are things in theatre that I know not to be afraid of. And one of them is that I'm not unfamiliar with the working for 8 weeks with a group of actors on something and then saying, right, it's the first preview, I'll see you in 2 hours, you know, good luck. So the idea of preparing actors to take wing and for it to be their own creation, for them to take ownership of it, as it were, that's very familiar. On the other hand, theatre is in one place, and this is constantly moving, constantly evolving, and in many ways technically a much bigger challenge than a normal film where you were able to jump 100 yards just in a cut. You know, you're able to take someone down a hillside in a cut, out of a house in a cut. And here you have to go down the hillside every pace through the house and outside. So you have to question and judge every second of real action. You know, and again, I think it's for others to say, well, is it a better or worse? It's its own thing. You know, I think you're looking for a perfect shape in both movies and plays. Physical and temporal shape is what you want. You're trying to get a rhythm. And that's, in a sense, like a piece of music almost, and that's what this felt like at times.
Yep.
Thank you
so much.
Thanks very much.